You know what a Pharisee is? Pharisees, you know what Pharisees in the New Testament is? In Jesus' day, in the New Testament, in the Gospels. Pharisees. Who and what and why are Pharisees? Well, they were religious leaders in Jesus' day in the Jewish religion. You probably would not have liked them very well. But they really served an important purpose. Almost 5 centuries before Jesus was born, the Jewish people were carried into captivity way down almost to the Persian Gulf area among the Babylons. They were scattered in colonies. They lost their temple, they lost their home, they lost their religious structure in Israel. They lost it all. They still had the Word of God, and they tried to keep their religion pure, straight. But you know, when you live among people that are different than your own, you kind of take on some of the cultures. Happens today. There are some people that tell me I don't talk the way I used to talk when I grew up in Pennsylvania. Have not learned to eat crawfish yet, but I have picked up a lot of cultural things here in the Deep South. I remember one time when I went back to Pennsylvania to visit someone, years after I had become a Christian and a Baptist, and I was in their home and I said something about the church house, the church house. They laughed at me. They said, "What? What is a church house? We know what a church is." To them, the church was the physical building. I said, "No, that is not the church. The church is people. But we worship in a building called a church house." I thought that was strange. That's Southern talk, by the way. You don't go up north and call it a church house. You just call it a church. Here we have a church house. Lots of different cultures that we picked up, that I have picked up since I have been here. Different way of talking. Let me give you an example right here in our country of how when people come here, they pick up culture. Catholicism. In Italy, there is Catholicism, period, okay? Strict Catholicism. American Catholicism, ask any priest, he'll admit it, it's different. Catholic women, for one thing, here in this country, do not follow some of the same kind of stringent rules that they would in Italy. Culture. You're affected by your culture where you live. Alexander the Great conquered the world. He died in something like 323 before Christ. And he left a culture all through that land that actually invaded Israel itself. The Greek language became a written and spoken language all through that land. Even the Jewish people took the Old Testament when they had moved to Alexandria, Egypt, and they were so influenced by Greek culture, they translated the Old Testament from Hebrew into Greek, and we call it the Septuagint. By the way, some of your New Testament quotations of the Old Testament are not from the Hebrew, but from the Greek Septuagint. So once in a while you will read in the New Testament an Old Testament quotation, and then you go back to your Old Testament and look, and it doesn't read exactly the same, because your Old Testament and mine, the English one, is from the Hebrew, Whereas in the New Testament days, it was from the Greek. We're affected by culture all of the time. All of the time. How much of our Baptist religion is Bible and how much of it is culture? Think about it, if you will. In Jesus' day, they were very afraid in Jewish religion of their religion being contaminated, tainted. And so a group of leadership grew up called Pharisees. And what the Pharisees did was establish rules and laws and regulations. It was like building a wall, a religious wall, around the people to keep them pure, to keep them from being contaminated. Example, I used to live in an area of the country up north that had Amish people. You read stories about the Amish people. You even have a little tiny store in Marksville, the Amish store. Amish people are very different in their practice. They build a religious wall around themselves because they're a minority. They don't use electricity, they don't use vehicles of the same kind, they don't use telephones. They build a wall around themselves, their dress, their habits, because they are afraid of being contaminated, made impure by the culture that is all around them. And it's so, it's true. So we have Pharisees. Now when Jesus was teaching, some of his opposition was from Pharisees, but not all of them. Not all Pharisees opposed Jesus. They were not all bad people as far as that goes. They just wanted to keep their religion pure. Very pure. In John chapter 12, verse 42, nevertheless, many even of the authorities, the leaders, the religious leaders, many of the authorities believed in Jesus, but for fear of the Pharisees, they did not confess so that they might not be put out of the synagogue, for they love the glory or the praise that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God. Sometimes we're like that. Sometimes we don't stand up to be counted because we don't want to be embarrassed. But there was a Pharisee who came to Jesus by night. John chapter 3, verse 1, there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a member of the Jewish leading council. This was the Supreme Court of Jesus' day. They could pass judgment on people. It's called the Sanhedrin, made up of 72 people who really ruled the roost and passed the laws. Nicodemus was a member of that supreme group. And he came to Jesus by night. I wonder why he came by night. Could it be that he just wanted a cool evening to talk to Jesus? Could it be that he couldn't sleep? You ever been that way? Where you were so troubled with your spirit within that you just couldn't sleep. You tossed and turned at night and you came to God in prayer because you couldn't sleep. You couldn't rest. Could it be that he was afraid of being seen? When I was a child, You've heard this before, some of you. Mother used to make me go to church. I think it was to get me out of the house. And I can understand that, being the kind of child I was. Went to a Presbyterian church. That church gave me a Bible. I did not want to be seen with that Bible. Because I'd have to walk to church, which was about a half a mile, and I had to walk past houses of my school chums, and I could just see them looking out the window. Hey, there goes little David Trimbur, he's got a Bible. I just knew that. So what did I do? You know what I did. I'm not going to try it here because I don't think I can anymore with my belly, but I used to stuff that Bible down in my trousers so they couldn't see it. I was afraid to be known as someone going to church. That was my experience as a child. Sometimes you don't stand up. Sometimes you don't stick out. Sometimes you don't want to be known. Whether it's at school, whether it's in the business world, whether it's in the agricultural world, whether it's in the marketplace, whether it's in the voting booth area. You don't want to stand out. You don't want to be seen. And so you, in essence, stuff it in your pants. If you got that. You can do that. You just hide it. And a lot of times these Nicodemuses of the world try to come to Jesus by night because they don't want embarrassed. They don't want to be known. Well, that may be, I don't know. Either can't sleep or he's afraid or whatever. And he said, Rabbi, which is an honorable word, teacher. He gives to Jesus respect. We know that you are a teacher who has come from God. For who could perform the miraculous signs that you are doing if God were not with him? Jesus replied, I tell you the truth, no one can see the kingdom of God unless he be born again, born all over again, new start, born from above, spiritual birth, new beginning. Nicodemus didn't understand this, but he's searching. You're not going to understand everything when you come to Christ. But you're searching. It's good to be a searcher. Inquiry is the beginning of faith. Don't ever be afraid of asking questions. Explore your faith. Explore the Word. Grow and learn. Because inquiry is the very beginning. And so he comes searching. That's where he starts. Now, I want you to go ahead a couple of years. Jesus has about a 3-year ministry. In the very beginning of it, Nicodemus, Pharisee, keeper of the law, religious leader, member of the Supreme Court, comes to Jesus, searching, wanting to know. You have come searching, wanting to know. You come to David's Bible class where you get the best answers. You'll listen to my sermons. You'll talk to each other. You'll read books. You may go on television. You may go on the internet. But you're searching. You want to know. You're reaching out. So here he is searching. That's where you begin. But I want you to come up to the 7th chapter of John. Go ahead another year or two. Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus earlier, John 7:50. Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus earlier, who was one of their own number, that a member of the Sanhedrin, asked, does our law condemn anyone without first hearing him to find out what he's doing? They wanted to kill Jesus. They wanted to arrest Jesus. They wanted to be away with Jesus. Nicodemus, very timidly, but at least outwardly, begins to sympathize with Jesus and to speak out. And they replied, are you from Galilee too? Look into it, and you will find that a prophet does not come out of Galilee. Then each of them went to their own home. But at least he begins to speak out. Do you see how he's grown? You see how he's changed? It took a year or so. But he's come from a person coming secretly searching to a person who, though with timid Now you come to the point where you're sympathizing. You like his teachings. You know he's a good person. You know that this place here exists for good reasons. You're asking questions. You're beginning to get answers. You're sympathetic. You're not quite there all the way yet. But we will be patient with you as you grow. I had to grow. I came to Christ at 19 and I knew zero. I knew nothing. But that little church at Simpson began to teach me. And I began to search. And I began to know. You're saved instantly, but you grow gradually. It takes time. You know what? We make a mistake sometimes as preachers at least. I won't talk about you, I'll talk about me. We judge people. We expect too much from new believers too soon. It takes time to grow, and you will be a Christian 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 60 years, 80 years maybe. You'll be a Christian, and you'll still be changing and growing. It'll be different. Searching and sympathizing. But then come all the way to the end of Jesus' ministry. We've gone to John chapter 3. We've seen him searching. We've gone to John chapter 7. We've seen him sympathizing, even though timid. Now we go to John chapter 19. Jesus has died on the cross, given his life as a sacrifice. He's dead. Super dead. Hanging there, limp. Rigor mortis has not set in yet. Do you know, I think about this. Joseph of Arimathea, John 19:38, asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now, Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly. Did you get that? Joseph of Arimathea was a secret one because he feared the Jews. With Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. He was accompanied by who? Nicodemus, the man who earlier had visited Jesus by night. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds, expensive. Even in John 19, the writer is reminding us of a man who came to Jesus secretly at night, timidly speaking up, and now he has come to the place where he's standing up publicly with Christ. You know, I'm not going to go overboard on this, but I think about it. I don't want to get morbid. I don't want to get gruesome. But I think about taking the body of Jesus off the cross. How'd they get the nails out? I mean, we're not talking about a claw hammer that you can just put under a nail and pull it out. No. You got nails through the flesh, through the feet, into hard wood. How they had to perhaps hammer both sides of that nail to get it loose and pull it out before the body of Jesus could be taken from the cross. It took time. It's in public. But they love Jesus. When you love Jesus, you'll inquire, you'll sympathize, but you will stand up for him. You think it was easy to go to Pilate and say, can we please have the body? Pilate, the man that put him to death. Pilate's the man that passed the sentence. This is risky business. Not too easy to go to the governor and say, please let me have his body. They took the chance. They took the risk. They took the dare. And they went and they stood for Jesus. Do you have the kind of courage to stand up in the face of offense, in the face of criticism, in the face of embarrassment, in the face of people who would... Someone prayed for people killing Christians. Oh, my friends, don't think martyrdom is from way back hundreds of years ago. It is today. Today we may have to take that stand. You do not know. And if you can't take the stand among God's people, if you cannot just stand up, this is the easy place. Come forward, I accept Jesus Christ. I want to be a part of this church. This is so simple, and yet look how hard it is for people to do it. But can you imagine? Do or die. We are so sheepish. We are so afraid. My God, you're among friends here. What do you do out there? Out there. What do you do even in here when someone acts unchristian towards you? Oh, my friend. Go beyond just searching, inquiring, asking questions, learning. Go beyond just saying, I kind of like this place, I like these people, I'm very sympathetic, I think the teachings of Jesus is so nice, and I really would like to. Go beyond it and take the stand. Go beyond it and say, I'm for him, I'm with him, I'll die with him, I'll live for him. Oh, give me that opportunity, oh God. My prayer for David Trimbur is that I will be non-judgmental and impatient with people who are gradually trying to grow. Love those who come here. Give them time to grow. Give ourselves time to grow. And as they're growing, help them. You saw it in the bulletin. I put it when I talked about what Grandma did. He stood me flat against that wall, put a little roller right across my face, drew that little line with the date. I don't know if that apartment's still there, but if it is, little old apartment in that steel mill town, and it was a little apartment, cheap apartment, terrible. But I remember on that door jamb, that doorpost, line, date, David. Where are you if we put a spiritual ruler on your head? Put you against that wall.